mit der Akzeptanz der
C'est pas parce que les
vier
Britanniques
Grundfreiheiten und dazu gehört
ont
auch
décidé
die
de sortir qu'ils ne doivent pas
Freizügigkeit
être
der
associés à ce
Personen.
processus.
Brexit means Brexit.
Hello and welcome to another Brexitometer brought to you by the Martin Center. It was supposed to be the week, the month, the time when Brexit would finally get real, and instead we are still stuck where we have been for 2 years now. The UK is looking to leave the EU in 3 months, but there's no deal agreed and its political system remains bitterly divided. Since our last episode, Theresa May tried to push her deal through Parliament, and she just to postpone the vote at the last moment. She survived the vote of no confidence in her own party, and she failed to secure concessions by her colleagues in the EU Council. So it's been an eventful 2 weeks, but all these events really amount to very little actual movement. The UK is still leaving and there's still no deal in place, and right now all bets are off about what will happen. Seriously, people in London have absolutely no idea about what will happen next, only scenarios and projections. At the time when we're recording this, Theresa May is recovering from turmoil in her own party and a pretty bad meeting with the rest of the leaders in the EU. So really, nobody really knows what she's up to next, and perhaps something amazing is going to happen before the end of the year, but assuming no other major developments take place before Christmas, I think now is a good time for us to seriously discuss the potential scenarios moving forward, because very, very soon Brexit is going to be a reality. So once again, the Brexitometer will take out its thermometer, and we're going to measure the temperature of all potential Brexit outcomes, from the deep freeze of a no deal all the way to the early coming of spring with the UK staying in the EU. So stay with us, there's a lot of scenarios and there's a lot of change of temperatures coming along. The first potential outcome of Brexit, and we start in the really deep freeze of the Brexit thermometer, is also one that is getting more probable with every passing day: no deal Brexit. The UK would leave the EU on March 29 without a deal, meaning that the economy and everyday life will suffer severe disruptions. No-deal Brexit is one of those things that nobody wants, but also nobody has found a way to stop either. In the British Parliament, there's actually few people who want no-deal Brexit, probably not more than 50 or 60 hardcore Eurosceptic conservatives. But the problem is that no-deal Brexit is the default outcome right now, with the UK having marked March 29 as its official date of departure. If the Parliament remains deadlocked, then the UK will simply sleepwalk into a no deal. In other words, someone has to do something to stop a no deal Brexit. It's just that right now, nobody has actually found out what that something is going to be. How probable is a no-deal Brexit? I don't think it's the most probable outcome, but right now the chances of it happening are uncomfortably high, and they are rising with every passing day. The more days of deadlock go by, the more probable a no-deal Brexit becomes. Another probable scenario, and we could call this the 0 degrees scenario, freezing cold but not ice age cold, will be if Brexit happens around the terms of the withdrawal agreement that Theresa May agreed with the EU in November. Now, as we know already very well, everybody hates this agreement, and right now the agreement looks dead in the water. We don't even know if Theresa May herself believes anymore that this agreement can be ratified. That's why she actually postponed the vote in Parliament in mid-December. However, if the UK wants still a negotiated exit from the EU, the parameters of Theresa May's agreement are really the only thing on offer by the EU. So her last remaining maneuver seems to be that she will try to push the deal through Parliament as late as she can, and she will effectively blackmail members of Parliament, telling them that if they don't approve the withdrawal agreement, then the UK will be faced with a no-deal Brexit. At the time of recording this, people have discussed January 12 or January 14 as a new potential date for the vote to take place in Parliament. After that date, if no deal is in place, everyone agrees that no deal becomes a real probability. There's another pathway for a negotiated Brexit, and that's a bit more spicy, and that is the pathway of a new general election. If Theresa May loses a vote of no confidence in Parliament, or if she decides to call an election to avoid another referendum, which she doesn't want, the choice at the polls is really going to be between the Conservative Party of Theresa May, who has her own withdrawal agreement, and Jeremy Corbyn's Labour. And Jeremy Corbyn also says that he wants a negotiated Brexit, just with a deal that is a bit different to the one of Theresa May's. In that case, any new government that will be formed will be a government that will try to rush some kind of an agreement, some kind of deal with the EU through Parliament, and any new agreement will look a lot like Theresa May's withdrawal agreement. But this is a high-risk strategy because there will be very little time left between any time an election takes place and the UK's negotiated exit from the EU. So this is also another probable outcome. It's the baseline outcome, having some kind of a negotiated Brexit. It looks very difficult right now, but there are still a lot of people who are trying to work towards this outcome. Now we're moving on to warmer temperatures in our thermometer, and here's a variety of scenarios that not a lot of people discuss, but there's a lot of people who are actually planning for them. There are scenarios that try to make Brexit as soft as possible, to the extent that it can even be Brexit in name only. So some pro-European politicians, particularly from the Labour Party, have suggested, for example, that the UK could request to leave the EU but actually enter the European Economic Area, like Norway. This means that the UK will be out of the EU, but it will essentially remain in the common market. And some people say that in order to avoid a hard border in Ireland, the UK will actually have to remain in a customs union with the EU, so there will be a Norway plus scenario. So the UK will be part of the common market and the customs union as well. Now, if you think, well, hold on a second, Norway Plus sounds a lot like actual EU membership, then you wouldn't be mistaken. Basically, a Norway Plus option means that the UK will have to pay into the EU budget. It will not have its own independent trade policy because it will be part of the customs union, and it will also have to accept freedom of movement, which is a dimension of the common market. It will basically be remaining in the EU in name only. So right now this scenario doesn't look very probable, not least because both Theresa May and Jeremy Corbyn want to deliver a real Brexit, but it may be the only way forward if Theresa May's deal crashes and there is no time for a new referendum and elections. This is really the option whereby the Parliament de facto takes control of the process, and there is a majority for a soft Brexit in the Parliament, and then maybe people from both the Conservative and the Labour Party work together to at least keep the UK in a temporary position such as Norway, and then they will try to figure out a more long-term position. Of course, another parameter is the EU and also Norway will have to accept that the UK will enter the European Economic Area. This isn't a scenario that is discussed a lot, not many people want it, but we should keep it in mind because if there is no deal and we're moving on to a crash Brexit in March 29, this might be an option that might become more and more probable. Finally, we reach really warm temperatures in our Brexit thermometer with a no Brexit scenario. All problems solved. The way for this to happen is, of course, another referendum. If the government and the parliament decide there is no alternative to no-deal Brexit they can agree upon, they can simply decide that it's up to the voters to have a final say about what they want, and after all, it's voters who put us in this mess in the first place by voting for Brexit in 2016. Right now, the option of a second referendum is resisted by the Conservative Party, of course, but also Jeremy Corbyn in Labour doesn't really want it, because if there is a second referendum, he's going to have to finally say whether he supports staying in the EU or not, that he doesn't want to divide his party. But if the political parties in the parliament are serious about avoiding a no-deal Brexit, then they don't want to take, and they also don't want to take responsibility of a no-deal crash. They may choose that in the end, the best thing to do is to push the responsibility back to the people. Another referendum has the advantage in comparison to another election that the EU has hinted that it may agree for the departure date to be extended a bit more to allow more time for the UK to organize a referendum and perhaps decide to remain after all. So is this the best possible outcome? there is something that we should be quite careful here. Even people who are quite against Brexit, such as me, we don't know yet what the question of the referendum would be. There are various discussions. People don't really know. It's going to be an option between remaining in the EU and Theresa May's deal, or remaining in the EU or no deal Brexit. So there is still a chance that no deal Brexit is actually going to be one of the options on the referendum, and that is a very, very risky strategy. We cannot be certain that the British people, if they had to choose between the humiliation of returning to the EU or deciding to crash out of the EU without any deal, I personally wouldn't bet on what the outcome of this vote would be. As we have seen, voters can get very emotional and sometimes they don't really decide the rational thing. So we may find ourselves descending rapidly from the warm temperatures of the UK remaining in the EU after all, back to the freezing depths of a no deal. But right now, another referendum with the option to remain in the EU has become much, much more probable than a few weeks ago, and it may still be something that we'll have to face in the first months of 2019. So this was another episode of Brexitometer. It's the last one of 2018, actually. A year where not a lot of things happen for way too long, and then a lot of things happen in a really short amount of time. Maybe any of the scenarios we discussed here, new elections, new referendum, new government, new deal, will be realized in the last 2 weeks of the year, but probably we will meet again in early 19, facing the same choices we have been discussing in the last few months. The new Brexitometer will come to you quite early in the new year. Let's hope that the holiday season will provide some time for reflection and relaxation to us all. If you have any burning questions about Brexit that you cannot get off your mind during the holiday season, you can always send your questions to me using the hashtag Brexitometer on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and I will answer those questions after the holiday season, after we return. Until then, take care, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and we'll meet again in 2019 when finally Brexit will become reality, or maybe not. We will see. Take care.
Mit der Akzeptanz der vier Grundfreiheiten und dazu gehört auch die Freizügigkeit der Personen.
Brexit means Brexit.